The House of Mapuhi. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For further information or to volunteer, please visit LibriVox.org. Note from reader. 1 fathom is equal to 6 English feet or a bit less than 2 meters. The House of Mapuhi by Jack London. Despite the heavy clumsiness of her lines, the Aorai handled easily in the light breeze, and her captain ran her well in before he hove to just outside the suck of the surf. The atoll of Hikueru lay low on the water, a circle of pounded coral sand 100 yards wide, 20 miles in circumference, and from 3 to 5 feet above high water mark. On the bottom of the huge and glassy lagoon was much pearl shell, and from the deck of the schooner, across the slender ring of the atoll, the divers could be seen at work. But the lagoon had no entrance for even a trading schooner. With a favoring breeze, cutters could win in through the tortuous and shallow channel, but the schooners lay off and on outside and sent in their small boats. The Aorai swung out a boat smartly, into which sprang half a dozen brown-skinned sailors clad only in scarlet loincloths. They took the oars, while in the stern sheets, at the steering sweep, stood a young man garbed in the tropic white that marks the European. The golden strain of Polynesia betrayed itself in the sun glint of his fair skin and cast up golden sheens and lights through the glimmering blue of his eyes. Raoul he was, Alexander Raoul, youngest son of Marie Raoul, the wealthy quarter caste, who owned and managed half a dozen trading schooners similar to the Aorai. Across the eddy, just outside the entrance, and in and through and over a boiling riptide, the boat fought its way to the mirrored column of the lagoon. Young Raoul leaped out onto the white sand and shook hands with the tall native. The man's chest and shoulders were magnificent, but the stump of a right arm, beyond the flesh of which the age-whitened bone projected several inches, attested the encounter with a shark that had put an end to his diving days and made him a fawner and an intriguer for small favors. "Have you heard, Alec?" were his first words. "Mapuhi has found a pearl. Such a pearl. Never was there one like it ever fished up in Hikueru, nor in all of Paumotus, nor in all the world. Buy it from him. He has it now. And remember that I told you first. He is a fool, and you can get it cheap. Have you any tobacco?" Straight up the beach to a shack under a pandanus tree Raoul headed. He was his mother's supercargo, and his business was to comb all the Paumotus for the wealth of copra, shell, and pearls that they yielded up. He was a young supercargo. It was his second voyage in such capacity, and he suffered much secret worry from his lack of experience in pricing pearls. But when Mapuhi exposed the pearl to his sight, he managed to suppress the startle it gave him, and to maintain a careless commercial expression on his face. For the pearl had struck him a blow. It was as large as a pigeon egg, a perfect sphere, of a whiteness that reflected opalescent lights from all colors about it. It was alive. Never had he seen anything like it. When Mapuhi dropped it into his hand he was surprised by the weight of it. That showed that it was a good pearl. He examined it closely through a pocket magnifying glass. It was without flaw or blemish. The purity of it seemed almost to melt into the atmosphere out of his hand. In the shade it was softly luminous, gleaming like a tender moon. So translucently white was it that when he dropped it into a glass of water he had difficulty in finding it. So straight and swiftly had it sunk to the bottom that he knew its weight was excellent. "Well, what do you want for it?" he asked, with a fine assumption of nonchalance. "I want," Mapuhi began, and behind him, framing his own dark face, the dark faces of 2 women and a girl nodded concurrence in what he wanted. Their heads were bent forward, they were animated by a suppressed eagerness, their eyes flashed avariciously. "I want a house," Mapuhi went on. "It must have a roof of galvanized iron and an octagon drop clock. It must be 6 fathoms long with a porch all around. A big room must be in the center, with a round table in the middle of it and the octagon drop clock on the wall. There must be 4 bedrooms, 2 on each side of the big room, and in each bedroom must be an iron bed, 2 chairs, and a washstand. And back of the house must be a kitchen, a good kitchen with pots and pans and a stove. And you must build the house on my island, which is Fakarava." "Is that all?" Raoul asked incredulously. "There must be a sewing machine," spoke up Tefara, Mapuhi's wife. "Not forgetting the octagon drop clock," added Nauri, Mapuhi's mother. "Yes, that is all," said Mapuhi. Young Raoul laughed. He laughed long and heartily. But while he laughed, he secretly performed problems in mental arithmetic. He had never built a house in his life, and his notions concerning house building were hazy. While he laughed, he calculated the cost of the voyage to Tahiti for the materials, of the materials themselves, of the voyage back again to Fakarava, and the cost of landing the materials and of building the house. It would come to 4,000 French dollars, allowing a margin for safety. 4,000 French dollars were equivalent to 20,000 francs. It was impossible. How was he to know the value of such a pearl? 20,000 francs was a lot of money, and of his mother's money at that. "Mapuhi," he said, "you are a big fool. Set a money price." But Mapuhi shook his head, and the 3 heads behind him shook with his. "I want the house," he said. "It must be 6 fathoms long with a porch all around." "Yes, yes," Raoul interrupted. "I know all about your house, but it won't do. I'll give you 1,000 Chili dollars." The 4 heads chorused a silent negative. "And 100 Chili dollars in trade." "I want the house," Mapuhi began. "What good will the house do you?" Raoul demanded. "The first hurricane that comes along will wash it away. You ought to know." "Captain Raffy says it looks like a hurricane right now." "Not on Fakarava," said Mapuhi. "The land is much higher there. On this island, yes. Any hurricane can sweep Hikueru. I will have the house on Fakarava. It must be 6 fathoms long with a porch all around." And Raoul listened again to the tale of the house. Several hours he spent in the endeavor to hammer the house obsession out of Mapuhi's mind, but Mapuhi's mother and wife and Nakaura, Mapuhi's daughter, bolstered him in his resolve for the house. Through the open doorway, while he listened for the 20th time to the detailed description of the house that was wanted, Raoul saw his schooner's second boat draw up on the beach. The sailors rested on the oars, advertising haste to be gone. The first mate of the Aorai sprang ashore, exchanged a word with the one-armed native, then hurried towards Raoul. The day grew suddenly dark, as a squall obscured the face of the sun. Across the lagoon Raoul could see approaching the ominous line of the puff of wind. "Captain Raffy says you've got to get to hell out of here," was the mate's greeting. "If there's any shell, we've got to run the risk of picking it up later on. So he says." The barometers dropped to 2970. The gust of wind struck the pandanus tree overhead and tore through the palms beyond, flinging half a dozen ripe coconuts with heavy thuds to the ground. Then came the rain out of the distance, advancing with the roar of a gale of wind and causing the water of the lagoon to smoke in driven windrows. The sharp rattle of the first drops was on the leaves when Raoul sprang to his feet. 1,000 Chili dollars, cash down, Mapuhi," he said, "and 200 Chili dollars in trade." "I want a house," the other began. "Mapuhi!" Raoul yelled, in order to make himself heard. "You are a fool." He flung out of the house, and side by side with the mate, fought his way down the beach toward the boat. They could not see the boat. The tropic rain sheeted about them so that they could see only the beach under their feet and the spiteful little waves from the lagoon that snapped and bit at the sand. A figure appeared through the deluge. It was Huru Huru, the man with the one arm. "Did you get the pearl?" he yelled in Raoul's ear. "Mapuhi is a fool," was the answering yell, and the next moment they were lost to each other in the descending water. Half an hour later, Huru Huru, watching from the seaward side of the atoll, saw the two